The Fujicast is an independent Loading Zone production.
Next week, Kev, bet you can't believe it's here. Next week, ex-weddings.
Woohoo!
Yeah, you almost sound like you believe that.
Woohoo!
Yeah, it's been a lot of hard work for you, I know.
Yeah, no, it's good.
But now's the fun bit.
Now's the fun bit. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. No, looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing all of your smiley faces in Bath next week.
Still a few tickets people can buy. I know some people like to do it very late, right on I know I'm free next week. I can do this. I was a little bit worried before, but now I really want to go and listen to these people, learn some stuff. And
so we have some. We've got some gifts to give away, some prizes, including Instax printers, Instax cameras.
Yeah.
We've got some free software to give away from some vendors.
Nice.
We've got some camera straps and all the other things like that. And bear in mind that we can only have 65 people in the room. Your chances of winning one could be quite high if you're there. If you're not there, you've got no chance.
Got to be in it to win it.
In it to win it.
That's what I said about that massive lottery. What was it, 170 million or something?
Did the guy turn up? They haven't found a ticket holder yet.
Has it not been claimed?
Oh, I don't know. They hadn't.
All right.
I thought you were about to tell me something else.
No. We had already spent 168 million of that at breakfast the following morning.
Yeah,
we said no, it wouldn't. We'd sort of. You'd like this because we said, a few close friends that we'd pay off their mortgages, give them a bit of money and stuff like that. You were in that list, so that was all right. Yeah,
cool.
But straight away it was decided that if you had that much money and they realised you'd won that much, that sooner or later people will come back and want more.
This is
the start of your troubles.
I do not understand. Like when you win,
you'd be okay. You'd be fine about it.
I'd be fine. Yeah,
with your £5.50.
Once I'd fix the holes in my socks and stuff, that'd be cool. But I do not understand. If you win the lottery, the people that go on the telly and go, "Woohoo, we won the lottery," they must get given something. There must be an incentive from Camelot.
It can't be money.
No. But they must be given. I reckon, like Camelot say to them something like, if you've won £100 million, you can either have it all now, but you have to come on the telly and go woohoo, or we'll give you £1 million a week for the next 100 weeks or something. I reckon there must, because who in their right mind would do it?
Yeah, you wouldn't want to, would you?
No, not at all.
I'd want to keep really quiet.
Yeah, I mean, when I won the lottery, I didn't tell any. Oh,
The Fujicast.
I'd like to believe that was true.
Yeah, so would I.
So welcome to the show. It's episode 30, 40 divided by 8 plus 9, 38.
Is it
38? So it won't be that long before we have our. It's not silver, is it? Well, what's 50th? It's a ruby anniversary.
You can't have a ruby anniversary in a 1 year cycle, because 2 weeks later it's the 1 year anniversary.
That's true. Okay,
we have to do something very good for 52 though.
That, yeah, for 52 we do have to do something. Yeah,
that'll be some time in January, I would have thought. It's January, February. That's when we started.
Yeah. So we'll do something. Maybe we should do another live show in front of people or something. Maybe not. Maybe Gemma and Sam should actually present the show.
Yeah, that would be very cool.
And we'll go out and get bladdered.
Yes.
They can join us later on.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much for joining us for episode 38. As always, thank you to our friends at Simpler Straps for letting us give away a couple of simpler camera straps to our favourite email questions of the week. If you'd like to go and see these straps in action, then it's simplr.us. simplr.us. They are perfectly proportioned for this ear Fuji stuff. Also, the guest on today's show is Paul Rogers, and it'll be about his time with the Times. He's a terrific wedding photographer, but I was interested in the photo journey that in particular he thought was going to end with him in an orange jumpsuit appealing to his family for the very last time. So that's one of the stories today with Paul and your questions, of course. So as always, do you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Go on then.
Why not? This is from Randy Tarr, and Randy Tarr from Pittsburgh, what's PA?
Philadelphia? No.
Pennsylvania.
There we go.
Yes.
Knew one of us would get it right. Well done.
Randy says, I've recently found a previously unknown passion for viewing art and photography books. Can you recommend 5 of your favourite and most influential to you personally? Now, that's I have to admit that I had this question teed up last week, but needed to think about it a little bit more. So I've brought it into this week. And Randy, I'm going to send you a strap because I love photo books.
Oh, that's a strap right at the start of the show.
Yeah, I love Pennsylvania. I've got family from there. I love
7 hour 55 minutes from here. We wanted to fly now.
Yeah.
Order the gin.
We could bring the strap with us, and I could bring you 5 photo books. All right, so, have you got 5?
I've got 2, but I know you got all 5, and I thought, well, if we do 10, it'll be forever. So I just brought out 2 in particular that I really like.
Right, you go first.
You heard of Bert Hardy?
Bert Hardy. Yeah.
Bert Hardy.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Well, that's a Bert Hardy at the back there. I was gifted that by Giles. That's a Bert Hardy print.
Right, yeah. Oh, that's nice.
He's from that picture postdoc. Started out as a lab assistant, ended up taking some of the most important pictures of London during the Second World War and the Blitz, though he did travel as well. He got closer to the action, as it were, though some might say there's plenty of that in the photographs of the devastation back home during that period. There's a real roll-out-the-barrel look, Kev, to his pictures. You can almost smell the real London tavern life. And equally, he's one of the early masters of shaping light, I think. And it probably comes from the fact that he was out night after night photographing the firefighters at work whilst London burned. And a couple of years ago, his vintage collection was selling at £700 to £800 per book or something. Obviously not this one.
That's a well-loved book, isn't it? Well thumbed.
Well, you know why I like this book? Because that wasn't mine to start with. Somebody else has owned this, then it became somebody else's, and it's been passed down through photographers. And actually, it was once a library book. Look, it's a stolen library book.
Yeah, but Phil Payne probably got that.
But the funniest thing about it was valued at 40p.
Yeah,
this is worth so much more than 40p. Anyway. Yeah. Bert Hardy, and the other one is Eyewitness, which we've talked about before, from Tom Stoddart. And I know I've got a lot of books up there by the greats like McCullin, and there's Genesis up there as well. But I think because of the personal experience of actually sitting down with Tom and going through that book, and him personally spending time with me and telling me about each of the pictures, has made that one of my real go-to books. Yeah. Eyewitness by Tom Stoddart. Right. I love that book.
I'm going to go. I've got 5 here.
You've got all 5.
That aren't. I wouldn't necessarily say were the ones that have the most impact in me. Some of them are, but I could go on forever because I must have about 300 books.
You're a real book collector.
I've gone with a little bit of a wide variety. So my first one is called Once Upon a Time in Wales by Robert Haynes.
Oh, right. Okay.
Amazing book. Right. And I'm not going to explain too much about why, but just get it, look it up. You can read the story about how those pictures became, but it's Once Upon a Time in Wales. It's essentially pictures of old blokes in pubs in the 1960s and 70s in Wales.
Are you in it?
I'm not in it, no. My dad might be in it.
Oh, look at these. These are fantastic.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so to summarise, he found he wasn't a professional photographer, but he used to take pictures, and he found this old box of undeveloped film under his bed, and he went and developed it. And one of them was this project he'd done about all of the pubs in his local village in I think it was like Aberavon or somewhere like that. And these places don't exist anymore. These old village pubs and stuff. They or certainly the characters don't. So he went around to try and find the people that were in it. And
this chat.
A lot of them were dead, unfortunately, but. Yeah, so Once Upon a Time in Wales by Robert Haynes. Loved that book. Absolutely loved that book.
I can see why you're drawn to that. But look at this guy, by the way, that character gurning there.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Second one is Family Love by Darcy Padilla. We talked about that.
I wondered whether you'd choose that one.
Load of times. Darcy Padilla. Family Love needs nothing more than a Google research to figure that out. Watch the little film on YouTube. Have your hankies with you for that one. I like James Revidius' book called The Recent Past as well. James Revidius. Now, James, obviously, we had Robin as a guest on. Robin is James's wife or widow, I should say.
And you interviewed her.
I interviewed her, and she was a guest on the Fujicast in episode 3 or 4.
I remember you stealing a cake or whatever.
Yeah.
She went out the room, and you just wrestled with a cake for about 30 seconds. Yeah. She left it in a wrapper that you couldn't unwrap.
Well, that's because in those days I just recorded everything. Just everything was recorded, and it was a challenge. That cake.
It was. And then she didn't eat any. She left you to eat it. That's funny.
She was the most pleasant lady I've ever met.
Sounded a wonderful interviewee.
She was amazing. And obviously her husband, James Revidius, and The Recent Past. So James was a photographer, a London photographer, based photographer, who headed to Devon and just photographed the local life, essentially. Yeah. And actually, so far, those 3 books all have very similar feeling to them.
Well, they do. I can see James and Robert as having...
Yeah, the same.
There's a common strand there.
There is, absolutely. And then I picked for my 4th one. I picked Bruce Davidson's East 100th Street, which is
slightly more gritty now.
Yeah, big book. I got a signed first edition of that.
Really?
Yeah, it's worth a load of money now.
Keep that in a safe.
Yeah. But I know I like the pictures. I like the book, obviously. But it's because what happens is you look at things like Once Upon a Time in Wales, or you look at the recent past, and you see, I mean, these are all people on the poverty line, but then you go to these pictures, Bruce Davidson stuff, and it's, you can see a very, very substantial difference. And then my final one that I selected was Diane Arbus, Revelations.
I wondered if you were going to go left field, but you haven't really.
Oh no, but I've just got so many to pick from, and the Revelations, I picked that one, I think probably because it was one of the last ones I picked up, I bought, and it's a real tome of a book. There's a lot of pictures, but there's also a lot of discussion in there. Really, really good. And of course, Diane Arbus, a legend in her own lifetime. A lot of people were inspired by her, and all of these people. When you look at all of these photo books, they're all shot on film. So you look at some of these pictures and you just think, my God, there's no way I could do it. I just do not have the capacity, skill, ability, patience.
You would have developed it, I think.
Boom, boom.
Pardon the expression, but you would have
possibly. I don't know, but possibly. But
might be working in a different way, clearly. But
but they stand the test of time, and you think about the digital world we live in, and the 10,000 frames per second cameras, and the first person to get something on Instagram with 1 million likes, and filters and stuff like that. And then you look at these things and you think, wow, proper talent.
How important are books?
Oh, hugely.
I mean, do you use it as, if you're feeling particularly like you need an energetic injection of creativity, do you use the books for that purpose?
No, I don't, and because I could never emulate. I can never use those for inspiration because they're just out of reach. For me, that kind of. Sometimes I look at that Once Upon a Time in Wales.
Doesn't it? You don't have to be able to do it to be inspired by something.
No, but it doesn't. If you
want, like somebody who looks at Pele playing football and thinks, "Well, I'll never be that." But I'm entirely,
Perhaps you're right. But sometimes I look at that Once Upon a Time in Wales and think, I want to go. And this is typical me, really. I suppose the pub opposite me, the Three Cups, real old Duffers pub, been there for hundreds of years. And I've been. I can get my Wi-Fi in there. It's great.
You can't get Wi-Fi.
I can. I can get my own Wi-Fi. It's that close to my house.
That close to your house.
So
how much money do you spend in there?
Well, none now because it's closed. It closed about 2 weeks ago.
No, why?
Well, because Craig, who ran it, that was it. It was just run out of money, basically.
Oh no!
And I kept saying to myself,
that pub's no longer. That's the one I park opposite.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's terrible.
I keep saying to myself, I need to go and do a Once Upon a Time in Wales in there because there's some really good old characters.
Why don't you?
It's too late.
Yeah, but you could start a pub business. Think of the money. There we go. Kev, what would you call it? The old dog. I don't know.
I'd never. It would be the worst thing in the world for me running a pub.
It's not reopened.
No, it's on the market now.
That is a shame.
It's owned by one of these anonymous pub landlord things. Oh, but it's about 400 years old. So the thing about that pub is it's got a covenant on it that means it has to be a hostelry. It can't hostelry pub. So it'll either be left open, left empty, or somebody will come and open it again.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your...
Yeah, that was cool. Thank you.
You sent a strap for that one, haven't you?
I did, to Randy Tarr.
To Randy. Well done, Randy.
Tarr.
Excellent, excellent.
More questions about books, please?
Yes, Jason.
Send us yours.
Jason, who just discovered your show not so long ago, started listening to it. Got to say, I love your podcast and the way you guys presented the information. Your show is the only photo-related podcast I listen to now. Thank you, Jason. My question for you guys, so many people using film simulation presets nowadays in an attempt to recapture the magic of an analog medium. What is your opinion on various film simulation presets? Do you use them? Do you have a favourite? By the way, I figure it's worth an ask. Are you guys still giving away camera straps? Can I have one? No, you see, the trouble is, Jason... You went in too soon after another strap. You see, otherwise, yes, you would have. You'd have been on that pile there, Jason, which is the definitely getting a. So you're gonna have to try again with another question. But I like that question though. Do you use film simulation? Well, you do. I know you do.
Yeah.
You use Acros. Do you look at Acros? But you.
I have to say the Acros film simulation is beautiful.
Yes.
And now the new classic neg that they're calling it in the X Pro 3 is phenomenal. I absolutely adore that film simulation.
What's different?
It's they told me it was meant to emulate like the superior film simulation film stock.
So now you're looking in colour.
It's colour, yeah. And I was
you always looked at stuff in black and white. In the past.
No, I know. But if you're looking for film simulation in the camera, then that's that. It's very filmic. It's very beautiful.
Do you mean it's more muted in its?
Yeah, it's kind of got muted greens and blues and stuff. It's really, really lovely. Absolutely lovely. Yeah. For a film simulation, a colour film simulation, I'm going to try and dig one out and show Neil on which means nothing to everybody that's listening, of course.
Go and take a picture.
No, I won't take a picture, but I'll find. I'm looking for one with a colour. That's the thing. Okay, here we go.
So
that's a film simulation. Is
wow,
classic,
that is good. The colours, they don't look muted, actually. They look, the colour on this chap's shirt, they look quite vibrant.
Yeah, the greens and the blues are kind of adjusted.
But the sea's kind of, I don't know if that's the result of it being an overcast day, but the sea seems to have melted away.
It's really nice. I do, so, I mean...
It is nice, actually. Good skin tone.
Yeah, it's beautiful, really beautiful.
There's a reason for having an X Pro 3 in itself, is it?
Yeah, although I would be very surprised if that film simulation didn't come to the other cameras.
Do you think there'll be an update that will...
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know, so don't hold me to it, but I would have thought they would bring that film simulation. That would be a lovely film simulation for filming in. Moving films.
That would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's really beautiful. So Acros, yes, I love it. I mean, you know what? There's no you should shoot JPEG, you should shoot RAW arguments. They're just not arguments worth having. But my personal preference for film sims are Acros, and now the classic Neg. I do adore that. I do really love it.
Well, Jason, who comes from Boston, which is one of those places that we said we were thinking about. We did. I don't know what the score, the tally was on
Massachusetts.
The end. Is it, yeah, that's Massachusetts. But what was the tally on where people suggested we went to do the
don't know. I didn't.
The show in America next year.
Isn't that what what Steve and Peter should be doing? Keeping tallies on that kind of thing.
Yeah, it should be. Steve, Peter, look at those. But it might be the only places we're welcome next year if Europe doesn't want us anymore. We've got we've only got our friends in America, haven't we?
Don't even talk.
Pop in and see that Trump bloke.
Don't be rude.
I'm trying not to be. Right, is it mine or yours? Oh, your question.
Mine. I think you just did the
last question before the interview.
Okay, so this is a question from Jake Hilder. Hi, Kevin and Neil. I'm always tinkering with wedding photography prices and packages, and also what I physically hand over to the couple. All my recent wedding couples have chosen packages where they just get the files on a nice little USB inside a nice little printed wooden box inside a nice little bag. Isn't that nice?
That's like one of those Russian dolls.
Yeah.
Within a.
To me, it's all felt a little bit naff just handing this over, even though this is what they are paid for. So I've been thinking about changing my products and upping the price to make the presentation a bit more special.
Yeah, you want to be taking them out for a meal like that guy we were talking about last week.
My question is, do you think the couples are bothered about how you give them or present them photographs? How do you both present your images and hand over the photographs? P.S. Great podcast, by the way. Keep up the good work. I've just booked on the X Weddings conference.
Oh, good for you.
Well done, Jake.
Look forward to seeing you.
P.P.S. I can't believe you gave Glasgow Lee a strap.
Yeah.
Did we?
We must have done. People remember things like that.
I've seen him in Hull recently. He didn't have a strap on.
Didn't he? Sorry. We're in a lot of trouble. That we shouldn't. We promised never to do. It's like innuendo bingo on Radio 1. So no more of that.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, as well, you'll have Gemma will be very angry with you for that kind of thing.
All right. So the question, going back to the question, and genuinely that was a faux pas. That was not a planned sentence.
I'll edit it out. Don't edit it, Tom. Leave it in.
So the question is, what do you give them, and do you think it's a bit naff?
Well, I don't think it's naff. I mean, I think what you decide to do is because that's marketing essentially, isn't it? That's post-wedding marketing. I do still provide a USB because I just think having something tangible, something that's you pick up rather than download, for me just feels appropriate for when somebody spends a certain amount of cash. Not everybody feels that way. Some people give away boxes, and the boxes having them all the lovely shredded paper, and the USB is within the shredded paper, and sometimes those boxes have some some prints which the photographer may sign, because as Joe Busick used to say, the moment you sign a photo, it becomes art. And that's kind of that's a touchy-feely way about it. I know you don't subscribe to that.
It's not that I don't subscribe to it. I totally agree with you. But I do digital downloads.
Yeah.
My tech doesn't have USB drives any longer. Does the new Apple
you have
devices?
to put it through a dongle if you want to put it into your.
It's digital download for me. But I totally agree with that. It's this idea of having something tactile to give to them, post to them.
Yeah.
The prints do it for me, so I'll send them a little print box in that respect. But yeah, I mean, it does come down to marketing. You said that it's down to marketing, and it's if you're gonna add something, for example, if you suddenly start adding, I don't know, let's just say a little mini 9-inch album to your package and saying that's included, you will get the questions, how much is it without that album? And then you have to jump through those hoops and deal with that and decide whether you want to actually deal with it or not. So personally, I think it's good to have a package where they don't physically get anything other than the artwork. And then everything, because that takes away all the questions from everything else. That gives you the latitude to have products on other packages.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for your question on that particular one. Oh, by the way, while I remember it, just before we go into the interview, filters. We were talking about filters just a moment ago, putting filters across pictures and stuff like that. I heard something that I don't know how true this is, so somebody can correct me. I'm sure somebody like Alan Gump will correct us on this. But if you put a filter over an Instagram picture, doesn't even matter if you lower the opacity to about 5%. Apparently, Instagram like that and sort of elevate you up the rankings a bit more. Or does that sound absolute hogwash?
But that's total.
Is it?
Yeah.
So shall I put that in the? That's something your granny would have told you.
Why would they do that?
My granny used to say that if you rub avocado in your neck, it will cure all sorts of ills.
My granny used to never sleep with a pillow because she thought that was what gave you double chin.
There we go. So should we put that into Granny told you that one day?
Yeah. Where did you hear that then?
Oh, I heard that a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Can't remember who told me that.
I can't believe that. I don't have any physical proof, but I cannot believe that. My pictures get enough traction. I don't put any filters on them.
No.
Nah.
Okay, all right. Well, that goes on the. That's the Granny told me that file.
It's not like they're advertising anything, or they're not getting any benefit from it.
Right. I'm sorry I mentioned it. Right, interview time. This week, Paul Rogers on his Time with the Times. Time with the Times. I want to start with a particular story, which for any photographer that finds themselves in a trickier zones, conflict zones where you're reporting on pretty hardened news stories. I think this particular story would have frightened the very bejingles out of me. Paul Rogers is this week's guest.
This was 2003 when I was working for the Times, and we travelled over to northern Iraq and to photograph the Americans who were hopefully coming into northern Iraq to help with the invasion. In the end, that didn't happen, and we spent a lot of time with the Kurdish Peshmerga up there. And one of the groups in northern Iraq and that part of Turkey is the Kurdish PKK group, which, as you may know, is listed by the Americans as a terrorist organisation. Obviously, it depends who you ask as to what the definition of that group is. But we wanted to spend some time with these guys and find out where they sat in relation to the Americans and the Kurds and the rest of what was going on in northern Iraq. We spent quite a bit of time finding the right people to speak to get in touch with the PKK. Eventually, we were invited to meet at a secret place at dawn, where we were transferred into a couple of 4x4 vehicles. We had a fixer with us and an interpreter, and apart from that, it was all PKK personnel. Now, they then took us in their own 4x4s through some valleys and up some hillsides, and we were probably driving for 2 or 3 hours into the mountains. We stopped at one point, and they unloaded all of our gear from the car, sat in a hut, and they were quite friendly with us until one of the PKK members turned up in the room with a video camera, and they sat us all down on the floor in front of all our gear and started filming. So they didn't really tell us what was going on, and they were asking us our name, what we were doing there, what our background was, a little bit about our family. And it was frankly quite terrifying, because at this point, this was back in 2003, so there had been a lot of footage on the news of journalists and other people being kidnapped in and around Iraq and held to ransom or worse. So all I could think at this point was, the next thing my wife or my family are going to see is my image on TV from this PKK person filming us in this hut. It was frankly terrifying. In the end, it wasn't quite as bad as it seemed. All they were doing was they were filming us for their own PR machine, and they wanted to know who they were inviting into their camp. But for that first few minutes of filming, it was a terrifying moment.
I spoke to a conflict photographer recently who was talking about the job of the fixer, and you mentioned the fixer, and he said, choosing the right fixer is the difference between not just getting the right story, but actually getting through the conflict. Because some of the fixers were known to sell to the highest bidder, and that could be the journalist, him or herself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was lucky enough to be with a very experienced war reporter, Anthony Lloyd, at the time, and we spent a lot of time looking for the right fixer. And in the end, I think on that particular trip we went through 2, possibly 3 fixers. But the final fixer we had, a guy called Awat, was a journalist on one of the local newspapers in Sulaymaniyah. So he already knew what we wanted to do. He knew how journalists operated. He knew all the right people, and he was very much on board with the stories that we were telling.
Like a few of the FujiCast interviews of late, longer versions will be available very soon, if not now if you're binging this at a later date. So Paul Rogers' full-length interview will be on the Breathe Pictures podcast. Now, there's little doubt that Paul is, in the news-gathering business, a respected and known figure. His transition through news to social photography now is a long and winding path. But I wanted to take him back to those formative years and how it all started.
I've always loved photography, and when I was at school, when I was 12 or 13, I remember a friend of mine who was very into photography taught me what f-stops were and shutter speed and depth of field, and I found it fascinating. So when I left that school, I started A-level college, and a friend of mine was also interested in photography, and we built a black and white darkroom in my mother's downstairs toilet, and experimented with the old Tri-X and T-Max film. We used to get the bulk loaders from Jessop's and buy 30 meters of film and go through it in a couple of days. And I remember I hadn't fully light-proofed the bathroom. In fact, it was a bathroom by day, and then I would fit all the my homemade light-proof blinds to the window, but it was never particularly light-proof. So in the summer, I used to have to wait till about 2 o'clock in the morning when the light was so low that there was no light leaks around the window.
So from there, you had your interest, you had your initial interest. You were doing what a lot of photographers these days would never experience. But where did you go? Was it college or university?
So from that point, I was doing physics and maths and economics A-levels, and I really enjoyed physics, and so that's what I didn't really have a vocation in mind. So I decided to carry on with physics. I got onto a physics course in Cardiff, and at Freshers Week, I remember going around Freshers Fair and looking at all the societies, and the student newspaper there had free pizza. So that was a draw. I went and had a couple of slices of pizza and got chatting to some of the editors and photographers there, and turned up a week later to see what it was all about. I was still interested in photography, but at this point there was no openings in the photography part of the newspaper. So I started in the screening room, which is essentially when the newspapers were made, and we had very rudimentary desktop publishing packages at that point, but they would output the pages onto a piece of bromide paper, and there would be a space for the photographs. So I spent a year doing that in the darkroom, screening other people's photographs, before I started taking actual photographs for the newspaper, and that's where my love of photojournalism began. At that point, I didn't really know that you could make a living from photography. It was still very much a hobby for me, and I was enjoying it so much that I ended up spending about 40 hours a week on the student newspaper. It's called Guy Reith, free word in Welsh, and we won several student newspaper awards and some photography awards, and it was a real buzz. It was a very tight knit group of people at the university that were very dedicated to telling these stories every week. We had a great circulation, and at some point I realised that there was a photojournalism course that had just begun in Cardiff. It was run by a very famous photography teacher called Daniel Meadows, and he had come from Newport College that had a well-established documentary photography course there under David Hearn. And when David finished that course, Daniel Meadows brought it to Cardiff. So in the space of a year or so of carrying on working at Guy Reith, I realised that this quite unique photojournalism course had opened in Cardiff, and that was really where I saw my next step.
I know I get the romantic notion of working in Fleet Street and in those newspapers as these sort of smoky atmospheres with terribly dramatic scenes each evening as deadline approached. Was it like that?
Yeah, the smoky scenes certainly were like that, and this was.
And much of the business done in the pub.
Yeah, a fair amount in the pub. I think when I joined the Times in 1998, and it was the tail end of that kind of era, I think. The Times, published by News International, was still in Wapping, where it had moved probably 20, 30 years before. And it was a big operation, a big Victorian building with printing works, and the darkroom was in a cellar of one of the older buildings. And the Times actually occupied I would say a relatively modern building just across the road from the main Wapping plant. The darkroom was definitely one of these smoky areas where people would be poring over contact sheets with a loop and marking contact sheets with a pen, and it was exciting times. The urgency back then, because we were still shooting on film to start with, so we would shoot a news job in London, race back to the office, either that or have the films couriered back to the office.
So during this period, it was just prior to digital, so digital was just about to take over. What was the feeling like as the science of photography began to change?
Well, we were offered digital cameras right at the start of that whole technological breakthrough, and I remember taking my first digital camera. The first major job I took it on was Kosovo, and they were kind of bulky machines. There was no screen on the back of them, and massive expensive cards that you could only shoot JPEGs to, and it was cutting edge. It was really exciting times to be able to take the card out and put it into an old laptop and see the image come up on the screen. It changed everything.
Someone approaching you now to find work in an editorial sense in picture making would get very different advice to what they would have received from you 2 decades ago, wouldn't they?
Yeah, two decades ago, it was all about just enthusiasm and knocking doors and continuing to try and get your foot in the door and then proving yourself. These days, I think the competition is so fierce that I really wouldn't know where to start in trying to break into newspaper photography at the moment. I suspect that there's so much competition that unless you've got something that stands out from the crowd, then it's going to be very hard to get your images seen, let alone published and someone paying for them.
Paul's work during those heady Fleet Street days reveals a portfolio that's brimming with inventiveness, and it's his creativity and inquisition that really draws me to his newswork in particular. Attention to detail that you'll hear more about in the Longer Breathe Pictures podcast version. But fast forwarding through his career slightly, there was to be an unexpected change of direction.
You avoided them for 16 years. You, like many of your colleagues, probably looked down slightly at the genre. But at some stage, you two got bitten by the wedding bug. And there was kind of a transition period, wasn't there, between you leaving being an editorial photographer and the weddings? Or was it the end of editorial that meant that you had to shoot weddings?
Yeah, a little bit of both there. When I was at the Times, I started on regular shifts shooting for the newspaper five days a week. And within a year or so, they'd offered me a contract. And it was in their best interests to have contract photographers. So I was never on staff at the Times. I was a regular freelance photographer that was then offered this contract. And it was a rolling 12-month contract whereby I agreed to work for them for 5 days a week for 48 weeks a year, I think. And that carried on for 16 years. Now, at the end of the 16 years, for several years before that, I was suspecting that contracts were going to come to an end at some point because of the proliferation of digital cameras and the sheer expense of maintaining a photographic staff at a newspaper. So I needed to find another avenue for my photography, and at that point I really didn't want to move into anything other than the documentary and the news style of photography that I'd been working at for the last 20 years. I wasn't interested in advertising or any other kind of editorialized photography. You're right in that when you said I'd avoided weddings for such a long time, because there was not a big market for documentary style photography at that time in weddings. And it's only when I started researching that area that I realized that it was a growing market. And there was a couple of big name photographers at the time shooting in that style. And a couple of friends of mine had made the move from newspapers into weddings, and I spoke to them about that. And that's really what sparked my interest in documentary wedding photography.
You have children now, still reasonably young. And I read how being in news and working in difficult environments for somebody like Don McCullin made such a stark difference to family life. Is it something you could do now?
I don't think so. I think when I first got married, that's when I started to think about what I did for a living and whether or not I wanted to continue flying into some of these dangerous situations. Now, when we had children, that's when I stopped accepting the commissions to war zones. As you get older, you classically become a more nervous flyer, and I found that throughout my 30s and 40s. And
it's not the flying I'd be worried about.
Well, that's just a manifestation of how I felt about my own personal safety. In my 20s, I couldn't care less, really. I was up for anything, and when I got married and you start to reevaluate where you are in life, you realise that there's someone else that you have a responsibility to. Obviously, that goes through the roof when you have kids. I've got a lot of respect for people who continue to work in those conditions at great personal sacrifice. I'm not just for themselves, but for their families as well. But it's not something that I chose to do. That's the point that I decided that I needed to find another way of continuing to work in the way that I work, but in a safer way.
You have an incredible patience, and I think if anybody looks through your work, and I mean patience, even in the more energetic photographs, your news pictures, your wedding pictures, there's often very energetic scenes, but you have a lot of patience. A lot of photographers run around. I always think of photographers that I see running around as almost like Jack Russells are chasing a ball, and I can't imagine you ever being that kind of photographer. And it seems to me, in a world where you can rattle off 10 frames a second, I mean, heavens, more than that, maybe 3 times as much as that now, and not give a damn about how much it may cost in film, that the patience to wait for a shot has kind of been rather damaging, sort of almost a disregard for composition. Would you say that that's one of the strengths of your photography is your patience? Yeah,
I'd 100% agree with that, and I've definitely been that Jack Russell, photographically speaking. I remember my first picture editor at News Team, a photographer called Ashley Coombs, who now works up in Scotland, a great wedding photographer up in Scotland. And I remember him saying to me, when I returned from a particular news job or a features job, he said, Paul, I always know when you screwed up your job because you come back with 6 rolls of film. And he says, when you come back with 1 or 2 rolls of film, I know you've nailed it. And his absolutely right. When you don't have any intention, when you're reacting and photographing blindly, essentially, you shoot far more than when you're a lot more dedicated to what you need to tell. So that was early on in my career, probably 1996, 97. And I've slowly, hopefully, progressed into the kind of photographer that does now wait patiently for pictures. I do shoot a lot of pictures, and at a wedding it's not unusual for me to shoot many thousands of frames, but I don't machine gun through the wedding. The way I work is to patiently wait for moments to peak and to shoot through that moment. So I may end up shooting 10 or 12 frames of a moment, which I wouldn't have been able to do on film, knowing that I can then pick and choose that in the cull later.
Thank you to Paul, and thank you, by the way, to you for some of the people you've been suggesting for interviews as well. It's really great, and I've been contacting people, and we're setting them up. So thank you for your suggestions. Very much appreciated. Very much not appreciated, though, is I'm afraid we've had a complaint. Kev?
Another one.
Yeah. This one's from Alan Gump. He's been fact-checking, and he got some 2 mentions in a row, Alan. Many thanks for your ongoing Fujicasts. Kevin in particular, thank you for sticking with your family holiday in Spain. He's got classic sort of corporate start off good, but it's going to descend. I continue to enjoy the repartee and sage advice from both of you. Not sage, but despite the occasional claims that clatter loudly, I'm afraid, on the floor. Specifically, Kevin's mention of Picasso instead of Van Gogh, who cut off his own ear.
Of course.
So you're wrong.
Of course.
Yeah, and Neil's posting of the absolute worst audio recording in existence of the Western Screech Owl. Remember when we did Wedding Guest or Bird?
Yeah, that was great. That was one of the best times of my life,
I took special umbrage at the latter, as on rare occasions, always deep into the night, my wife and I hear the love... I don't want to go further.
That's it. Stop. This is a family show.
My wife and I hear the lovely, soft, rising double trill of this small and reclusive owl. You've given 27,000 plus subscribers the wrong impression of this special creature, and you owe it to serious and heartfelt apology to that bird. I suggest a sleepless night in the woods on your knees at the base of the largest fir tree you can find.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Gump.
27,000 subscribers.
No, the way he's getting his figures. I'll tell you what, he can't count. And thank you, by the way, for the recommendation, Mr. Gump, of Daniel Milner, who's a super photographer, Santa Fe-based Leica Hasselblad and Fujifilm photographer, who is currently the creative evangelist, and he has been for quite some while, actually, for Blurb magazines.
Ah, yes. I remember
he's one of those,
that website, yeah.
He's one of those totally sort of super good-looking...
Does everything.
Hate him kind of bloke, because he's just so good at everything.
Yes,
you know?
I know.
The sort that makes you just...
We knew. Right.
Very good suggestion, though. Thank you, Alan.
I have a quick question from Nicholas Vengalia.
Yeah.
Venagalia.
How do you spell it?
Venaglia.
Vengalia.
Yeah.
There you go.
Hey gents, loving the podcast. I was wondering if either of you have tried the Fuji XF10. I don't see a lot of love for the camera. That's it.
Is that it?
That's it.
Have you tried the X?
I have tried the XF10.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's okay.
Is that the one that Laura had with her?
Not sure. Might have been.
Yeah. The Brighton.
It's
thing.
teeny and it's 24 megapixel sensor. It's.
Yeah. I mean, it packs a punch, doesn't it? That.
Yeah. I mean, it's not. It's. I don't know. I think it costs about £400, so it's proper entry level, cheaper than a mobile phone, isn't it? Really.
Can you imagine that though? Years ago, 24 megapixel camera, entry level, £400.
Yeah.
Do you remember how many megawatts it was in your original camera?
First one I had was 1 megapixel camera. And it came free with a computer, and it was a Fujifilm Finepix something or other.
What about your first
digital
DSLR? Your DSLR.
My first digital DSLR was a Canon EOS 3. I want to say 300D.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
300D.
I would probably 12 megapixels.
Be the megawatts.
I would say about 12.
300D. Are you sure?
300D. They don't call it in America. They call it different, don't they? They call it like Rebel Without a Cause or something. Oh, there you go. 6.3 megapixels.
6.3, yeah.
Yeah. August? No, that can't be right. 2003. That is right. Yeah, of course that is right. Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking 2013. Yeah, that's it.
So now my first was a Nikon D100, and I'm sure that was less than that.
6 megapixel.
6 megapixels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you win,
and I think
you win by 0.3 megapixels.
Well, yeah, but you could rarely use it very well in low light. I mean, I think the 1600 ISO was the that was the range, 200 to 1600, 6400 special mode. But I don't think I ever went anywhere near special. So yeah.
Yeah. So no, quite right. XF10, so it's 24 megapixel sensor. Pretty lightweight. No, it's not a replacement for the X70 or anything like that. So I've always, that's funny, I'm waffling on about this little camera. I keep thinking about getting one because I think it's perfect pub camera, as I call it.
Is it? Well, not for your pub anymore, unfortunately. But
not my pub that's shut.
Why would that be a perfect pub camera?
Well, because it's not the end of the world if you lose it. It's not.
Do you often lose cameras in pubs?
Well, no, but I have potential. I've lost other things in pubs.
Okay, all right. I went past the other day. I went back to Hertfordshire to go interview somebody, and on the way back, I went past I went down Port Hill, which those that know Hertford and Benja, that's the very steep hill right at the bottom. There used to be the Bell and Crown, which was the first pub I ever went in, and I thought, what I was going to do is park up and go and have a little shandy because I was driving in the Bell and Crown, but they made it into flats.
Oh. How annoying.
I know. End of the Bell and Crown. I mean, that was you always remember with great affection, don't you, that first pub where you nipped in there. Maybe you should not have been drinking. And somehow you escaped the under 18 rule with a pint. Your first pint.
Malmesbury, you know Malmesbury is a tiny little place.
I can say that about Bell and Crown now because it's no longer there. Won't get in trouble.
Quite right, yeah. All the policemen will be after you. But it used to have...
Not after me, after them.
Malmesbury used to have something like 65 pubs. It was packed.
No way, 65 in Malmesbury?
You know the little triangle area where I live, where you park your car?
Yeah.
There was 5 pubs there.
No way.
Yeah.
Was there enough people to go to that? Well, I suppose
there was.
Was that the only entertainment in Malmesbury?
Pretty much, yeah. And then they've all closed down one after the other, and now we're down to, I think we've got 2 real pubs left. 3, perhaps.
That is a shame.
Yeah.
Kate Broughton. Hi, guys. Thank you for the podcast. Kevin, don't read the next line. Well, he won't because he's not reading it. It's fantastic to listen to, although I was slightly shocked when you both struggled to figure out who Monty Don was.
Yeah.
We did have an issue with Monty, didn't we?
That's the fella who had that bottle of champagne named after him, wasn't it?
No. Monty was the guy that was in charge of World War II or something, wasn't he?
That's Montgomery.
Oh, right. Anyway, I'm new to the Fuji game and bought an XT20 last year as a gateway, not drug, in brackets, says Kate, into the Fuji world. I mainly use my camera for street photos, filming and hyperlapsing. On one recent occasion where I'd hyperlapsed an old ruin, it's not a very nice way to talk about your grandmother, in a nearby park using my XF23 F2, I brought the photos into Lightroom and noticed an awful oil painting effect on all the pictures. I did a bit of Googling into the issue and found some post on a forum entitled, "Is this the famous oil painting effect?" where somebody had the same trouble back in 2015. However, I can't make head nor tail of what the problem is and why it's done this. It's a shame as it's made my photos look like they've all had some terrible Photoshop oil painting with back to filters added to them, cheap and nasty. Any help, please, here, Kev, from Kate.
It sounds like it's the worming effect that we've kind of come to hear about over the years.
Yeah.
So Lightroom, and it's the way Lightroom processes those files rather than
it's not to do with the camera. They probably look fine in the camera.
It's not to do with the camera as such. It's to do with the way Lightroom processes them. So you can either, as a test, I would open those files up in download a free trial of Capture One or Silky Pics. Actually, is the best
Silky
one.
Pics.
Silky Pics.
Oh, okay.
Silky Pics is the official RAW editor for Fujifilm.
Right.
Terrible interface, but probably still the best RAW editor there is.
Okay.
Anyway, so try and open it up in one of the other non-Lightroom applications and see if you have the same problem. Adjust the sharpening. It's usually a case of over-sharpening. But without seeing the pictures, it's hard to tell. It could well be that you didn't have the... when you say hyperlapse, does that mean long exposure or really fast? Hyperlapse is lots of...
hyperlapse is lots of
exposure.
pictures, and generally you can move with the...
Yeah, so it might have been on a little gimbal-y turntable-y type thing.
Yeah.
So one would be in the long exposure.
Well, it doesn't have to be, does it?
Noise reduction. If it's a long exposure, sometimes people forget to turn on the long exposure noise reduction in the camera, and that can cause effects. So just double check that. I think hyperlapsing is like taking very quick photos and moving the body of the camera.
Time lapse is when you're doing a nice scene. Typical time lapse would be, cars in London at night with all the light trails. And hyperlapsing would be when you move a couple of feet with the camera each time.
So a couple of things like that to try.
There isn't, as with Canon, they have a super film, a movie file that comes out of doing time lapsing, so you don't have to take it into into Lightroom.
No,
it produces a movie for you. Do you think Fujifilm will ever think of doing something like that? It's quite a handy feature.
Possibly, I don't know. They have they have the intervalometer in the cameras. But
everything does that now.
Technical term for it, but I don't think I never use it, so I don't think it will.
I always thought there was a really cool Canon feature, was that being able to turn out, if you wanted to do a quick hyperlapse for time lapse rather for a film, having that movie feature where it turns it out as one movie file was really cool. The Fujifilm cameras don't do that. Or if they do, Alan Gump, tell me, and I will be eternally grateful to you, but they don't.
What I do love in the X Pro 3 is the new, you can do a tone curve and you've got clarity and things like that in the JPEGs. So you've got a lot more control over your JPEGs now.
Wow.
But I can't find. I'm trying to find the hyperlapse, the time-lapse stuff.
Yeah. It'll be within movies if it's going to be.
Yeah, no, I've got the interval timer shooting.
So that will be in the stills menu.
But I don't know. There's a new thing here called interval timer shooting exposure smoothing. Multiple exposure control. Oh, there's multiple exposure control buttons here.
How many multiples do you need?
Yeah, all that stuff. Pass.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, open it in a different RAW app and see what you get.
Last couple of questions. Kev, you go first.
Okay, I have one from Christy E. Joachim or Joachim.
Here we go again. How do you spell it?
Jochim.
Joachim.
Or Joachim.
I think it's Joachim. What do you think, Joachim? Joachim?
Christy E. Joachim. Yeah.
Yeah.
More right.
You get that for that.
Hi, Kevin and Neil. I've recently been binging on your podcast, so now I've got a few random questions for you. First,
I like random.
First, if you edit a whole scene in black and white, such as inside of the church, what do you do if your client asks for the colour version instead?
Oh, can of worms.
Question 1.
Yeah.
Is this something that you discussed before the wedding? Second, Neil, do you back button focus? I know you do, Kevin, and I was curious if Neil does too. I hear so many people saying that once they switched to Fuji, they stopped using back button focus. Stopped or started? Stopped, she says.
Stopped, yeah. I've heard people say that.
Stopped using it? Don't understand that. My last question is for Kevin. On one of the podcasts, you somewhat mentioned leaving shortly after the first dance. Do you do this at most weddings? And if so, do you discuss this with your clients beforehand? Thank you so much, guys. Keep up the podcast going. I'm totally hooked. And by the way, your podcast is actually my first ever that I've listened to.
Oh, well, welcome along.
Welcome.
Delighted to be your first.
All right, so question 1 then, Neil. If you supply black and white,
yes,
and they ask for colour, what happens?
It rarely happens. Can't remember the last time it did, to be honest. But I mean, I shoot in RAW, so if it's a real issue, I can always supply it. Yes.
Yeah.
But I always say to people, trust me. I'm going to give you the ones in black and white that work because of latitude, light latitude, or whatever.
Quite right. Yeah. Same for me. Pretty much. I give them an option to purchase all black and white, all colour coverage.
Yeah.
So if they don't purchase that, then I can always say to them, well, you did have a choice.
That package works quite well for you, doesn't it? Having it in colour and black and white. It's a good marketing decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's that. Back button focusing. Okay,
no,
so
I don't use it.
You don't use back button focusing?
I still don't. You've told me so many times to use it, and I still... Single point with the half depressed shutter, bang, happy enough.
Did you
never used it in Canon either?
Okay, fine. So there's
something I'm not used to doing.
There's the answer, Christy, to that. Neil doesn't. I do. Would be a boring world if we all did the same thing, for sure.
Well, hashtag be like Kev. I've done everything else you've done.
My last question is for Kevin. One of the podcasts you somewhat mentioned leaving shortly after the first dance. Do you do this at most weddings? And if so, do you discuss this with your clients beforehand? So, yeah, I mean, my coverage generally is prep to first dance. I'll nearly always stay a little longer for especially if the DJ has not put Diana Ross on.
it's Diana Ross, yeah.
And there's some dancing going on. I'll usually stay for a little longer. But that's it. That's generally the package. I do offer them options for increased time. So 2, 3, 4 hours after the first dance. If they want that, they can have that, of course. But generally, bridal prep the first dance.
Does have you noticed of late of offering later packages that people are taking later packages?
They are.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I really don't know.
So it's something I wished I'd have done years ago. I never used to offer the late show.
Maybe it's because we've only just started offering it, so we're only noticing it.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. It's something I should have done a long time ago.
My next wedding in November, they've paid for midnight coverage.
Have they? So, and I bet you're now wishing you'd have done it ages ago as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, in terms of... I increased my revenue by 18% last year by offering late editions. Yeah. And by that I mean different things to the clients a month before the wedding. Yeah. Things like time upgrades, albums, black and white colour, expedited editing, fast motion films, all of those kind of things. Increased my revenue by 18%.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think with that, as I always say to couples, I'm not necessarily going to say goodbye.
I never say goodbye.
Yeah.
I never do, and
it's not because I don't like them or have not. And I literally say this: it's not because I don't like you, I haven't had a good time, or I'm bored, or I want to go home, or anything like that. It's just because the last thing you need is some idiot photographer coming up to you doing this Shakespearean tragedy. I'm going now because you want to spend time with your friends.
Yeah,
you don't want some idiot photographer marching across to do his goodbyes and start hugging you and all that.
No, I never. I
don't have the last bit in, obviously.
I just go, yeah, absolutely.
So that was based on another photographer that I know that says hug your clients more, get to know them, get in. And I'm thinking, no, it's just like personal space.
Yeah. I mean, if I walk past them on the way out, then of course I'll speak to them.
Would you give them a hug?
No.
You're not really huggy, man.
Occasionally, no, I didn't. Yeah, quite right. Occasionally, the bride.
Come on, give us a hug.
Occasionally, the bride might do a kind of, an air kiss cheek thing.
Yeah.
In which case, obviously, I'll throw my hairy beard in her direction. That's about it.
All right, moving on. Last question, Darren Lingerfeld. Hi guys, love my newest discovery of the FujiCast. Appreciate what you guys do for the community. Oh, Kevin, really? He's a community man. This question may be geared more toward Kev, as I discovered his blog. Kev, you're getting ready shots for weddings. So we've had a few weddings questions this week. It's always the luck of the draw. Probably my favourite in your albums. And I'm trying to get better at standing back and I'm just observing the big day. Given that you take that approach, I notice that your focal length is on the wider side, yet closer to the subjects, possibly 18 or 23. So you can answer that in a minute. I've taken a great interest in the 18 f2 and was wondering if you felt invasive at times with this focal length. Because you do have to get closer with that 18, don't you? Yeah,
I don't use the 18 that much. I do use it occasionally, but 23 not much. You do. 23 I use a lot. Yeah.
So for 35mm full focal length.
Yeah, no, it's not invasive. It's
full.
You definitely have to play everything by ear. Certainly, some weddings, certainly at bridal prep, sometimes it's more a case of just sitting, stay on the other side of the bed and just shooting across it and not getting involved. Sometimes you can get away with a bit more. You got to play everything by ear. You never. I think we've said this before. Try never to let the wedding. The stuff that's going on at the wedding should happen naturally, and the photography should be there just to take pictures of what happens, not affect it.
What about when you're out on the street? What do you use? What's your main focal length?
23. Same thing, yeah. 23, 35 equivalent, X100, 23.
Do you do
23.
an awful lot of pre-focal length?
I use a lot of zone focusing.
Yeah, that's what I meant, zone, sorry.
And since I've been using X Pro 3, I've been using the flip screen a bit more, just to try and get used to it really on that street photography thing, because I don't really use it for street photography.
So you've been a real X100F user for street photography. With the X Pro 3 now, I see it standing there saying, use me. Will that be used more often?
Probably not. Not for street photography.
Still going to stick with the X100?
X100F, X70 for me are the goodies. I will use it.
For their form factor.
I will use it. Of course I will use it, but it wouldn't be the thing I would use if I had to say, right, which one. But that's because I have all those other 3 cameras.
Yeah.
Most people don't. Most people only have 1 camera, in which case the X Pro 3 is a great choice.
You're going to have to stop producing cameras because you're going to have no more room in your cupboard soon for these.
I'm bumping them off. I'm selling the load off.
Are you?
Yeah.
Right. Although it does come with, I'd say, a very healthy...
Warning.
I'm not sure, having seen, you need dividers in your bag. And unless somebody's attached to one of Kevin's cameras, because I like bags that are all scratched up and look like they've been well used.
Yes, X Pro 3 is made of titanium, and apparently the only thing you can damage it with is diamond.
Is that right?
Yeah, diamond.
Well, there we go. I don't think you keep a lot of diamonds in your...
Sadly not. No, sadly.
That's it for another week. Thank you very much. We will join you back next week. Next week, of course, is the X Weddings Conference. Looking forward to it. And look at him. He's leaning back thinking, God, when will it be over?
Yes. Loving it.
Like this. Thank you to our guest this week, Paul Rogers, and also big love to our friends at Simpler Straps, simplr.us, if you'd like to go and see their amazing range of straps that are just fantastic for the sort of form factor that Fujifilm cameras have. Thank you for your questions. If you'd like to send them in, they are the lifeblood of the show. Click at fujicast.co.uk. Music from Blue Wednesday, an art list for their additional and payoffs. Right, well, you've got the lovely Steve Brand this week.
Kevin's Instagram is Kevin Mullins Photography. His website is kevinmullinsphotography.co.uk. Or for all those street workshops, training and everything else Fujifilm, pop over to f16.click. I'm Steve Brand. My Instagram is StevieB Photography, and my website is image2image.co.uk.
I like the way he goes, tomatoes, get your tomatoes. So Tim Binder's doing mine.
Neil's Instagram is Neil James. See his films on YouTube at Neil James Photo. His website is neiljames.com for pictures and one-to-one mentoring. I'm Tim Bender from Indiana. My Instagram is TimothyBme, TimothyBme, and my website is timothybme.com.
Thank you, and we will see you we will literally see some of you next week at the X Weddings.
Yep, can't wait. Looking forward to it so much. Yes, it's coming. Ready.
The FujiCast is an independent loading zone production. Email the show with your questions and words of wisdom to click@fujicast.co.uk. Email any complaints and political nonsense to our wives, who will deal with your comments in their own good time and in their own good way.